At home, we're providing funding for everything from the University of Saskatchewan's Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization for their work on vaccine development to Vancouver-based Abcelera for treatments. Right across the country, we're making sure that Canadians can keep leading. Our $850 million commitment also includes support for vaccine development through the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations and the WHO's Solidarity Trial that helps hospitals share information on treatments. The more we cooperate, the more likely that we find a cure and find it quickly. And that's something we all want to see.
From the beginning of this crisis, we have been focused on what's been happening here. We're working hard to ensure the safety of all Canadians, support our frontline workers, and prepare the recovery of our economy. But COVID-19 is a global challenge that requires a global solution, and everyone must do their part. Canada's contribution to the global fight against COVID-19, which amounts to more than $850 million, includes investments in research carried out in both Canada and around the world. It also includes the development of a vaccine through the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations and the WHO's Solidarity Trial. By working all together on these issues, we are maximizing our opportunities to find a solution more quickly. And that's what all countries and all citizens of the world would like to see.
COVID-19 is an unprecedented challenge, but it's not the first time that Canadians have been called to do their part. Over the past generations, Canadians have time and time again stepped up in defense of our shared future. This week marks the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands and a Victory in Europe Day. From the fall of 1944 to the spring of '45, thousands of Canadians pushed back the occupying forces, road by road, town by town. They fought, and many died, to defend the values that we hold dear: peace and democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. And today, 75 years later, we remember their courage and their sacrifice. Earlier this morning, I spoke with Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. We talked about the close, lasting bonds of friendship that exist between our two countries. We talked about how we collaborated together in years past, standing for our values, fighting side by side, and how we're doing that again today in this global crisis, in friendship and in solidarity. So today, I ask all Canadians to join me and our friends and allies in the Netherlands at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to observe 2 minutes of silence in honor of our veterans. As we pause, let's reflect on how each of us can live up to their example. Maybe you'll do your part by staying home to protect our healthcare workers. Maybe you'll bring groceries to an elderly neighbor, or make a donation to a food bank, or simply make the effort of sending a postcard to a veteran to thank them for their service. With your actions, you're contributing to your community and demonstrating that Canadians, time and time again, will continue to step up. I know the weather's getting nicer, but we still need to be extremely careful. And not just for our seniors, but for everyone around us. So don't go out unless you absolutely have to. And if you do, keep 2 meters apart from each other. Cette semaine marque le 75e anniversaire de la libération des Pays-Bas et du jour de la victoire en Europe.
And the Victory in Europe Day. From the fall of 1944 to the spring of 1945, thousands of Canadians fought back the occupation forces, one town at a time. They fought and gave their lives to defend the values that we hold dear. And today, 75 years later, we remember their courage and their their sacrifice. At 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I am asking all Canadians to join me to observe 2 minutes of silence in honor of all our veterans. During those 2 minutes, let us all think of how we can follow their example. Perhaps you're going to do your share by staying home to protect our healthcare workers, or making a donation to a food bank, or writing a postcard to a veteran to thank them. Each of us can help our community. But whatever you decide to do continue to stay home and keep a distance of 2 meters between you and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone for questions. Just a reminder, one question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Kate Belangaro, Bloomberg, line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. We've heard from Canadian Airlines that the government is studying what is happening elsewhere to help the sector, and they're getting a lot of aid in other countries, and they are direct competitors of the Canadian industry. So I'm wondering, what exactly is your government looking at to help the airline sector beyond the wage subsidy, and why is it taking so long to roll this out?
We have in Canada a very strong airline sector, and we need to continue to have a strong airline sector once this is all done. So, of course, we're looking very carefully at how to support industries like that are so important to Canada and to Canadians. But one of the key things that we were able to do right off the bat, which helped massively in the airline sector and elsewhere, was move forward on the CERB and the wage subsidy. Ensuring that Canadians can continue to keep their jobs even as they stay home, that they continue to have that link to their employers, is going to allow our economy to come back stronger and the damage done by this COVID-19 pandemic to be minimized. We will have more to say about sectoral supports in the future, but for now, the support that we've given to workers right across the country is making a very real difference. We
know that we had a very strong airline industry before the pandemic, and we will continue to have one afterwards. But during this pandemic, it's important to support industries and especially workers, and that is why we introduced the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and the wage subsidy to ensure that people can stay home, but at the same time have money to buy groceries or pay their rent. And also to ensure that when the economy starts up again, they will still have their jobs and they will still have a job attachment. So we will have more to say about that in the coming days, about how we will specifically helping certain industries that have been very hard hit by this pandemic, such as the airline industry. But for the time being, the wage subsidy and the CERB are doing a great job helping Canadians right across the country.
So I have a very quick question regarding the Bank of Canada nomination. You've been committed to more equality and diversity across government positions. Why did your government decide to follow the same model by nominating another English-speaking man to the role instead of a Francophone or a woman?
We were fortunate in this country to have many extraordinary people qualified to head up the Bank of Canada, and we made the determination on who would be the best to see us through this difficult time and 7 years into the future as well. And I know that Tiff Macklem will do just that. Nous avions un processus à suivre.
We had a certain process to follow, and we had a number of candidates who were interested in the position, and we made the choice of the best person for this position during this crisis and in the next years of our economic recovery. And Tiff Macklem is certainly that person.
Moderator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Laura Osman, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you about the EU pledge conference this morning. The money pledged by Canada is sort of money that's already been announced. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation estimate it'll take about $20 billion in the long term to roll out a vaccine worldwide. So why is it that Canada is not bringing more money to the table, and has Canada been asked to pledge more in the coming days and weeks?
The The pledging conference this morning was a beginning. It was a recognition that many countries are already stepping up in developing research and science towards a global vaccine. Canada has made significant investments, as you've highlighted, in our scientists and researchers who are world-class and who are contributing to finding solutions not just for Canadians, but for the entire world. It is really important that the world comes together to collaborate, because even once we find a vaccine, whether it's in Canada or elsewhere around the world, we will share that vaccine in its formula. But production of that vaccine will be extremely important right around the world as well. It cannot just be the wealthiest countries producing that vaccine for its citizens, for their citizens. We need to ensure that there are systems in place so that the billions of people around the world who are vulnerable can get these vaccines as well. That's why this takes a global effort, and that's why Canada is so pleased to be able to contribute through what we're doing here at home and investments overseas as well. And there will be more to come as the world grapples with this pandemic. Okay. We
know that, yes, we have some of the best scientists here in Canada who are conducting incredible research to develop a vaccine. But there are also global efforts that are required. And we are in the process of providing historic funding for this research here in Canada and also to help in the global fight. But we also know that it will require a great deal of coordination and collaboration globally, and that's why Canada is so proud to take part to the level of $850 million in investments, not only for Canada but globally, to show that we are part of this global approach to finding a solution, because we need that for everyone.
Thank you. And on the emergency financial benefit, will the current benefit programs be adjusted to account for the slow and gradual return of people to work and the fact that they may return to earning too much income to qualify for benefits, but not enough to sort of get back to where they were and make ends meet and pay the bills?
Laura, I really look forward to facing that challenge of how we start to scale back the benefits and help people get back to work. We're not there yet. We're very much still trying to make sure that people are getting the support they need, even as the economy is starting to gradually reopen. Our focus is on keeping people safe and ensuring that they have the ability to stay home and pay for groceries and pay their rents and support each other. So yes, obviously a lot of thought is going into the various steps that are going to be needed as we get people out of their homes and back to work. But for now, we're still very much focused on how we help people through this.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Raymond Filion. TVA, à vous.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Along the same lines, the wage subsidy is for 12 weeks. And do you intend to extend that program? Well, I believe there is a great deal of reflection that has to go on with respect to the next steps. We know that at some point people will be returning to work, but in what industry and what region, and how are we going to manage that transition between the support we're currently providing people and what happens when they go back to work. So that's something we have to think deeply about. But for now, we're focused on helping people while the economy is closed. And these issues regarding reopening and a gradual return to work will need to be the object of many discussions with the provinces and various industries and within government. Follow-up? Now, in an interview yesterday, you said that in hindsight, maybe your government should have done some things differently. Could you tell us exactly which things you should have done differently? Well, certainly in an unprecedented crisis such as this, we are doing the best we possibly could. Now, are there things we could have done differently? Certainly. And I know that after all of this is over, there will be people making recommendations recommendations and checking things and looking at how we can be better prepared the next time, if there is a next time. But for the time being, my priority is what I need to do today and tomorrow to help Canadians, to protect people, and to ensure that we can get through this properly. I don't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. I'm looking at what we need to do now and in the coming weeks.
And we'll take one more question on the phone, please. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to your announcement on Friday about firearms. Now, there was some vagueness as to what would happen to people who still owned illegal firearms. Now, what is your preference? What is the explanation you can give in terms of allowing those firearms to remain in circulation even though they're prohibited? Now, that's a very good question. Now, our announcement last week was that we would prohibit the sale and use and transfer of assault-style weapons. That is a major step forward in terms of more stringent gun control in Canada, and we're very happy to be able to do that. We promised that during the election, and now we've delivered. Now, in terms of the next steps, as you say, we have to figure out exactly how this should work, how the buyback program should be established, what specific measures, such as grandfathering, should work if we do that. So we'll be looking at a lot of different factors. We'll be talking to the different parties, and we'll also be looking at what has proved to be effective as a system and reasonable, and what will protect citizens best. So this will all be part of discussions we'll have in Parliament and with the different groups that are preoccupied by this, and we will find the right answers for Canada. Yes, but am I to understand, because you talked about the opposition parties, am I understanding that you're not sure that you will get the support of at least one party in the House on this buyback program? Or is it a question of there being too many in circulation and this costing the government too much? Well, I think there are a lot of factors that have to be reviewed. For me, it's not really a question of cost. The safety of Canadians is my absolute priority, and we'll do whatever is necessary. Now, we are in a minority parliament, and we must work with the other parties. And I know that the Bloc Québécois and the New Democratic Party have a perspective that is very close to our own when it comes to stricter gun control. And I'm quite convinced that we'll be able to work together and collaborate to find the best way forward.
Important legislation on we brought forward important measures on banning the sale, the purchase, and the use of military-style assault weapons in this country. This is a significant step towards more gun control in this country, and a very important one. But there are many other steps to take, and there are many details to be worked out on exactly how the buyback program will work, whether and what sort of grandfathering there might be. These are things that we will be working on as we move forward towards legislation. We will have to work with other parties in the House, not just because we want to establish a strong consensus, but because in a minority parliament it is necessary to get the support of other parties. And I know that both the Bloc Québécois and the NDP are very strong, aligned with us in wanting more and better gun control. And we're going to work together, and I'm sure we're going to be able to get the right balance for Canadians to keep people safe in their communities as we move forward.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Christian Noël,
Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. The budget is normally tabled in March, and now it's May. Is it your intention to introduce a budget or an economic statement before June? Where are you in your reflection on that, and is it absolutely necessary? Well, at this point in time, we are investing in helping Canadians through billions of dollars going out to them because of this pandemic. And at every briefing and every time the ministers come together in their noon conferences, we talk about what we're doing and what we're seeing happening in the coming weeks and what we continue to focus on. And we will continue to be open and transparent at every step. In terms of a budget, normally the budget presents projections of what's going to happen in the coming year and the actions we intend to take as a government. But now we're in a period of tremendous uncertainty as to what exactly will happen next week or 3 months from now. So we will continue to try and be open and transparent, both with the measures we present and our projections for the economy. And we will find ways to share that information. But we are not yet able to determine the best way of going forward, whether it should be an economic statement or a budget, or whether there's another way to share more information with Canadians as to what we're seeing in the coming months.
We have been extremely transparent with Canadians about the investments we're making in this unprecedented times, whether it's the billions of dollars in support for Canadian families across the country or measures that we're moving forward with to support small businesses. We have been announcing just about every single day, me here or ministers, what we're doing and sharing it with Canadians. A budget typically is an expression of what people can expect in the coming year, both in terms of how the economy is going to unfold, what sort of measures are going to be brought in. And in normal times, it's usually pretty accurate. Right now, we're in a situation where there is a tremendous degree of uncertainty as to what the economy could look like 6 months from now, what the economy could look like 3 months from now, what's going to happen in the coming weeks. So while we are continuing to be open and transparent, the reflections on at what point we might be able to present a budget or even just an economic update is ongoing. We will continue to keep everyone apprised of what we're doing and what we see coming, and we'll continue to look for ways to share with Canadians.
Ce que j'en comprends, c'est que dans votre esprit, on est encore en mode réactif.
In your mind, we're still responding rather than acting. So do you think it's completely ruled out, the presentation of a budget between now and June? No, it's not ruled out. Of course, we want to be able to give Canadians confidence that we have a plan to respond and meet this challenge. So right from the start, we have been reacting, responding to the situation we find ourselves in, which is quite unprecedented. And at the same time, we're looking forward towards the economic recovery and how we can position Canada to come out of this as best possible. The investments we've made in supporting small businesses and workers in order to ensure that people keep their job attachment, even if they stay home. All of these things are not just a response, but they are a preparation for a recovery that could be very positive for Canadians. But that reflection and that work continue, and we will always be looking at how we can give Canadians confidence and share the information they need.
Gallagher with CTV National News. Prime Minister, I just want to go back to the question about potential financial aid for the airline sector. Air Canada posted a first quarter $1 billion loss, or in excess of $1 billion. I just want you to clarify in your answer. It seemed that are bailouts for affected industries that have been especially hard hit during this pandemic off the table? Is there any possibility outside of the programs you've already announced?
We moved forward very quickly on supports for workers through the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and through the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which is being taken up by companies large and small across the country, including airlines who see this as a real way of making sure that when life starts to return to normal, they are able to get their employees back to work very quickly. This was the emergency priority that we had as a government to ensure that Canadians from coast to coast to coast would be okay to be able to stay at home, to be able to buy their groceries and support their families and pay their rents and do the things that would allow us to stay safe. But we recognize that companies, large and small, in various sectors across this country are particularly hard hit by COVID-19. I think of the airline industry, I think of the tourism sector, I think of the energy sector, and other significant sectors that will require more support on that. We will be looking at sectoral supports. We will be making announcements on that in the coming days or week. It is something we have to get right, but we will be looking at measures to ensure that some of our most important sectors for the Canadian economy continue to stay strong through this pandemic and mostly beyond it.
There's a great deal of concern from employees at the Cargill meat processing plant in High River, Alberta, that are going back to work now after the plant was shut down because of the death and multiple cases there for COVID-19. You said last week that your top priority is ensuring worker safety. These workers don't feel safe. What more can the federal government do in terms of inspecting food processing plants to ensure the utmost safety during this time?
We're working with provinces across the country to ensure that the supply chain for agriculture continues and that worker safety is upheld. Though that is a provincial area of responsibility, but the federal government has a role to play as well, particularly around ensuring that there are adequate safeguards and PPEs in place. One will remember that the CFIB, Canadian Food Inspectors, are designed to inspect the food for safety, are ensuring that the way meat is handled, the way vegetables are processed is not putting Canadian safety at risk. The responsibility for the protection of the workers in that place is not the primary, or hasn't been the primary responsibility of the CFIB. That is much more for provincial labour codes. But we will, of course, be there to support the provinces in its work to ensure both the continued flow of supply chains for our food, but also the protection of workers who could be vulnerable right across the country. Okay. Le Canada
Canada is a country that is concerned about the security and safety of its citizens. The federal government has the responsibility to ensure that any food prepared for consumption here in Canada is safe and hygienic. And the work of the federal agency is connected to that. But it is not the direct responsibility of the federal agency to look after the safety of workers. That falls more within provincial jurisdiction. But of course, the federal government will be there to help and support and participate as much as possible in ensuring the protection of workers in our food industry. We will be there to work with the provinces, both to protect our food supply and the safety of all workers.
Global News. Prime Minister, a question about the Policing the Pandemic report, which shows $5.8 million in fines have been levied against Canadians for COVID-19 enforcement. How do you reconcile the support the federal government is providing to Canadians with the fact that other levels of government are handing out substantial amounts of fines?
I think it's extremely important that Canadians continue to behave as we have largely in social distancing, in staying home, in keeping ourselves, our loved ones, our families, our extended families, our seniors, our healthcare workers, and our essential workers safe from rapid spread of COVID-19. The federal supports that we've given to workers, to families, to students, to people right across the country have been so that people can stay home, so that they can engage in social distancing. So they do prevent further spread of COVID-19. And we are seeing over the past weeks that the curve is flattening. And we are on a positive trajectory. We are not out of the woods, however, and it requires us to continue to remain attentive and vigilant in following the instructions set out by our public health officials. And that's why different jurisdictions have different, more specific rules suitable for their own jurisdictions. And that is also why they have taken it upon themselves as a responsibility to ensure that those rules be followed for the protection of all Canadians.
On sending your kids back to school, what specific protections would you want to see in place so that kids and teachers are safe?
I think obviously that's an area of provincial jurisdiction that I won't weigh in as Prime Minister, but as a parent I can certainly say that looking at what sort of social distancing measures will be in place, what are the kids going to do at recess, what are the kids going to do at lunch, how many kids are going to be in a classroom, how my kids are going to be kept safe, are things that all parents are thinking about, and all parents will want to see that the school system, the province, the teachers are grappling with before we move forward in the next steps. And I know that there are an awful lot of people at all those different levels working on that right now.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News. How do you feel about countries that aren't contributing to this global pledge but have in the past, and how the means to do so again?
I think this is a moment for people to come together and recognize that we all have ways of contributing to solving this problem. I think if it is a global pandemic, and what happens outside our borders, no matter how well we handle what's going on inside our borders, will have an impact on us directly with potential further spread of COVID-19, or indirectly with disrupted supply chains and a weakened global economy upon which we all depend. I think we need to look at doing our part. Certainly Canada has a long and storied tradition of stepping up as we mark the 75th anniversary of Canadians liberating the Netherlands tomorrow. We know that Canadians have always stepped up and will continue to step up because we recognize that our role within the world does matter. And I would encourage all countries to see that the only way we're going to get through this is if we get through this together.
On another matter, in Canada, women have been hit harder than men by COVID-19. And when you look at many sectors that employ women, such as the service industry, they are suffering right now. So I'm wondering, how can your government ensure women aren't set back by this virus?
I think a number of people have talked about the fact that this is a economic crisis that has hit our most vulnerable and most marginalized peoples the most. And women have been extremely hard hit in the service sector, in the home care sector, as well as a number of marginal and more challenged communities, whether it be new Canadians or whether it be young people. We need to make sure, and that's why as a government we've moved forward on protecting vulnerable people with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, with extra help for charitable organizations and networks that are there to work for each other. One of the things that has been a real preoccupation for this government is when we tell people to stay home, to stay safe, and their home isn't safe, what do? The impact of domestic violence at a time of tremendous stress and anxiety for all of us in society that can exacerbate situations of domestic violence is something that we are deeply preoccupied with as a country and as a government. That's why we've made investments in shelters and in networks to support women fleeing domestic violence, and we will continue to recognize that this pandemic isn't hitting everyone equally, that the most vulnerable, as they so often are, more vulnerable, and that is why we have to do everything we can to support the people who need our help, including and especially women through this. Okay.
We recognize that a pandemic such as this or a crisis does not affect everyone equally. Women are extremely vulnerable because of their jobs, and often they are the first jobs to disappear in this type of situation. And they're also facing domestic violence, and we know that there's a lot of tension and stress in households because of COVID-19. And what does someone do when the choice is staying home to be safe or not, because your home is not safe? The reality of domestic violence is hitting people hard these days, and that's why we're making investments in shelters, in networks that help women and children fleeing violence. So we will continue to fight gender-based violence. This is a concern for us and for all Canadians. So we will continue to do whatever we can to help. Thank you.
All right, that is the